G'day, it's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Dowling from the website and YouTube channel Kangaroo Court of Australia. Now, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioners and the Inspector of the NACC went before Parliament a week ago, and it was quite pathetic, really. Not only did they duck and weave, but the politicians who were questioning them didn't do their job properly. And I published an article on it, and I'll read that article out, and then I'll show you a video from David Shoubridge, who published a video not long after I published my article. Now, the article's titled NACC Commissioner Paul Brereton makes federal politicians look like fools at Parliament hearing. It's published on Thursday, the 28th of November 2024. And it starts off, federal politicians on the Joint Committee on the National Anti-Corruption Commission were made to look like fools by NACC Commissioner Paul Brereton at a hearing last Friday, the 22nd of November 2024 in Canberra. NACC Commissioner Paul Brereton should have been easy pickings for the politicians, given he was found guilty of officer misconduct after he was exposed for lying and deceiving about recusing himself from the decision not to investigate the Robodebt 6, which included his friend Catherine Campbell. While NACC Commissioner Paul Brereton did take some hits in questions from Senator David Shoubridge and to a lesser degree Deputy Chair Dr Helen Haines MP, the other politicians on the committee were weak and feeble at best with their questions, and some didn't even bother to attend. But all the politicians failed badly to ask NACC Deputy Commissioners any hard questions, with only Deputy Commissioner Nicole Rose receiving questions, and both Deputy Commissioner Ben Gauntlet and Deputy Commissioner Kylie Kilgore receiving no questions. NACC Commissioner Paul Brereton's corrupt conduct wasn't by him alone. It was a conspiracy with the three Deputy Commissioners and NACC CEO, as they all knew Paul Brereton should have been nowhere near the Robodebt matter, but they all allowed Brereton to be heavily involved before, during and after the decision not to investigate the Robodebt 6. The below video is of the full hearing of the Joint Committee asking questions of NACC Commissioner, the deputies and CEO, and is followed by the full hearing of the Joint Committee asking questions of the Inspector of the NACC, Gail Furness SC. Now, if you want to watch that video, I'll put a link to the video below this video on YouTube. And the article goes on to say, for the NACC Annual Report 2023 to 2024, click here. For the Inspector of the NACC Annual Report, you can click there on the article as well. And I'll put a link to the article below this video on YouTube as well. The Inspector of the NACC, Gail Furness SC, also dodged any bullets and was not asked any hard questions by anyone. The Joint Committee on the NACC, which is made up of federal politicians, MPs and senators, is the oversight body for the NACC that is meant to hold the NACC accountable. But based on the Joint Committee's performance last Friday, they are failing badly to do their job, and the lot should resign or be sacked. While it could be argued that Senator David Shoubridge and Deputy Chair Dr Helen Haines, MP, did their jobs questioning Commissioner Paul Brereton, they failed just as badly as other politicians when it came to questioning the Deputy Commissioners and the Inspector of the NACC, Gail Furness SC. Questions that should have been asked but were not. The NACC Deputy Commissioners all should have been asked why they allowed Commissioner Paul Brereton to be involved before, during and after the Robodebt decision was made, given they all knew Brereton had a conflict of interest, but they were never asked, which I find scandalous. Given they are all meant to be experts in the law, they all should have come to the same conclusion as the Inspector of the NACC, Gail Furness SC, and former Judge Alan Robertson, that Paul Brereton should not have been involved at all. So, why did they allow it to happen? The Inspector of the NACC, Gail Furness SC, should have been asked why she muzzled former Judge Alan Robertson to protect Paul Brereton and others from criminal charges. And there's a link to the article I wrote about that. The article goes on to say, there are a lot more questions that should have been asked, but the Labor and Coalition members of the Joint Committee were never going to ask hard questions, given Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Coalition leader Peter Dutton set up the NACC to hide corruption, not to expose it. Senator David Shoubridge and Deputy Chair Dr Helen Haines MP also didn't ask Gail Furness SC any hard questions. With Helen Haines, I think maybe it was because she was just out of her depth, but David Shoubridge is a lawyer, and he would know Gail Furness is up to her neck in a cover-up, but he let it slide, which isn't good enough. Does Shoubridge know Gail Furness personally, or is it just attorney respect law in action where lawyers always look after each other? Shoubridge has a good reputation for exposing corruption, but his protection of Gail Furness loses him a lot of points. Joint Committee on the National Anti-Corruption Commission fails at the first hurdle. I previously wrote, NACC Commissioner Paul Brereton engaging in officer misconduct has met and exceeded the NACC's own exceptional circumstances criteria to justify a public hearing into Brereton's misconduct. Failure to have a public hearing will leave a stench of corruption hanging over the NACC until Brereton resigns, maybe long after. And that, I argue, meets the NACC's own exceptional circumstances criteria to justify a public hearing. And while Paul Brereton remains NACC Commissioner, the Joint Committee is a failure. Why didn't the Joint Committee ask Paul Brereton to resign last Friday? Because most of them want a corrupt commissioner. Paul Brereton might have taken a bit of heat last Friday, but at the end of the hearing, he hopped up and walked out, knowing he was still the NACC Commissioner, and that by itself made the Joint Committee look like the fools they are. Now, I published that article Thursday morning, and a couple of hours later, David Shoubridge published a video, and I'll show you that video now. It relates to Paul Brereton, the NACC Commissioner. He headed up the Brereton inquiry into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan, and in that report he handed down, he found that certain soldiers were potentially liable for war crimes, but he found that none of the senior officers could be liable at all. But then another report was handed down later by the government saying that Brereton got it wrong. The senior officers could be liable, which makes it very obvious he was trying to protect him. Now I'll show you that video by David Shoubridge.
As we're here today, David McBride, who told the truth about war crimes in Afghanistan, is in jail. And he's in jail and was attacked by this government. He was attacked by this government because he called out the lack of accountability for the leadership in the ADF for the war crimes that happened in Afghanistan. And he has been utterly vindicated in the oversight report by Dr Vivienne Thom, who fundamentally disagreed with the Brereton report conclusion that the leadership of the ADF should get off scot-free for any responsibility for the war crimes in Afghanistan. And when you go back and you read that Brereton report and you realise that at the time he was held senior office in the reserves for the ADF, and he decided to give all of his senior mates a get-out-of-jail-free card in that report, it starts to make things fall in place, because that's who the Labor government, with the support of the coalition, decided to put in charge of the National Anti-Corruption Commission. And since then, we have seen Dr Vivienne Thom's report land and the oversight report come and smash the conclusion of Brereton and 100% support what David McBride said. And I'll quote briefly from Vivienne Thom's report. The panel did not agree with the Brereton inquiry's view that some accountability and responsibility could not fall on the most senior officers, and it suggested the issue should be the subject of further consideration. What has the government done with that? Bury the report. And when you read Vivienne Thom's report, she points out the failure of defence leadership to see the intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance reports, the lack of having ethical leadership, the fact that there was no curiosity from the senior leadership. And I say this, that senior leadership are covered with medals and retirement bonuses, and David McBride's in jail. It's a disgrace.
Now, I published a video back in May titled Anti-Corruption Commissioner Paul Brereton Exposed Acting Corruptly by Government Report, and that expands more on what David Shoubridge said then in a lot more detail. I'll put a link to that video below this video on YouTube. And please hit the like and subscribe button and notification button, and please share this video on social media. Other than that, Kangaroo Court of Australia's independent media. I publish a website and a YouTube channel, and I'm 100% crowdfunded from viewers like yourself, so please support my PayPal account or Patreon account. You can donate any amount, $3, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30, $40, $50 a month, whatever suits your budget. It all helps out in a big way. And the link for the Patreon account and PayPal account below this video on YouTube. And there's also the link there for the donation page on my website with other donation options. Other than that, thank you for your time and have a good day.